It's the Chickenfoot Hour with Judahbuddha and Arthurspoonr, aka Joseph and
What's
Judah.
up?
How you doing today?
Good. How you doing?
Never been more mediocre. Okay, so I have a joke to start us off today,
Okay.
and it's not one I made up. So I was thinking of like a point system where like we get double points if we make it up.
Okay.
Okay. And we get a point if the other person laughs. And then afterwards we'll kind of dissect it and say like what worked, what didn't work. Okay. And so by the end of the season we'll see who has the most points. Okay. All right, so here's the joke. So the doctor says, Larry, everything looks great. How you been doing mentally and emotionally? Are you at peace with God? Or Larry, an old man, at this point, he's just getting his checkup. He replies, you know what? God and I are pretty good. He knows I have poor eyesight, and so he's fixed it so that when I get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, poof, the lights go on. Then, when I'm done, just like that, poof, they go off. It's made my life a lot better. Wow, that's incredible, says the doctor. Yeah. Well, a little later, after the guy goes home and the doctor's still thinking about it, he says, I'm going to call his wife. So he calls up Larry's wife. He says, hey, Bonnie. And she says, how you doing? He says, well, look, I just had an interesting conversation with Larry. And he says that he's doing fine. But I just had a call because he said that in his relationship with God, he gets up during the middle of the night and poof, the lights go on in the bathroom, and then when he's done, poof, the lights go off. Oh no! Exclaims Bonnie. He's peeing in the refrigerator again.
Peeing in the refrigerator. That reminds me of a story. So remind me of this joke at the end.
Okay.
The punchline, and then I'll remember the story.
All right. So what worked? What didn't work for you for that joke? I'll start off by saying like, I don't like. I feel like it needs a little bit more setup or something. Like you need to like care a little bit more, maybe a little less. It's almost like it kind of starts in the middle of a story and ends, and I don't know. It's the payoff isn't as good because I think you're almost expecting something like that, Maybe it needs some more diversion, something to kind of throw you off the scent. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, one, the presentation when it comes to telling jokes is it's kind of better when it's kind of like you're thinking of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Were you reading it?
Yeah. I was.
Yeah. Because exclaimed. Like those kind of words kind of.
Did I say exclaimed?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
So those kind of things. So the presentation, some of it takes away, and then it's like too long of a build up. For the punchline.
Yeah.
I think the punchline will be okay if
keep it quicker.
Yeah. So the punchline has to equal the setup.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
The longer the setup, the bigger the laugh it's supposed to be.
Okay, so if it's like if you're expecting a little laugh, like if it's not like that slam dunk of a punchline, then you need to keep the build up shorter.
Yeah, so I think the satisfactory aspect of it is if the punchline is not like huge, but the setup isn't huge either, then you'll think it's so like those old timey stand-up comedians where they'll say, "Take my wife, please."
Yeah.
Right. So, so that's just like a really, really small, but
so maybe just saying like, oh, the other day a guy was at the doctor and the doctor asked him, you want to go deeper about his spirituality. I asked, how you doing with God? He said, you know what? It's funny you should ask. God made it so that, he cured my eyesight at night. So he made it so the light goes on when I go pee, goes off when I leave. The guy says, okay. And when he's walking Larry back to the waiting room, he mentions it to the wife. Oh, he said that God turns on the light and on again and off again when he goes to the bathroom. She says, he's peeing in the refrigerator again. I gotta get the punchline right.
Well, the other thing that I would say is the punchline's got to be more quicker.
Yeah.
Punchier
punchline.
So instead of refrigerator, the fridge. Pissing in the fridge again.
He's pissing in the fridge again.
That sounds more like what somebody will say. He's urinating in the refrigerator again. The crisper is full of urine. I think if you put it in, that's one thing that I remember as a kid when you'd hear jokes at the school.
Mm-hmm.
I would always kind of, because I couldn't remember it, because I try to remember the wording of it. Excuse me. So instead, what I'd do is I'd reword it so it would be how I would say it, and then I would remember it. So I'd never say, "Oh, he's peeing in the refrigerator again." I said he's pissing in the fridge again.
He's pissing in the fridge again. So maybe.
And then she wouldn't be excited. She'd be pissed. She's pissing in the fridge again. Like pissing in the fridge again.
Yeah, you're right.
Or maybe she'd say.
He turns to her. Maybe she turns to him and is like, "You pissing in the fridge again?"
or, okay, so he talks to the guy, and the guy is in the in the room, the doctor's the examining room. Doctor leaves the room and the wife's sitting there, and he says, what's the guy's name? Jim?
Larry.
So Larry says that when he goes to the bathroom, God turns on the light and turns off the light every time he goes to the bathroom. She's like, yeah, he's pissing in the fridge again.
That is better.
She's well aware of it.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
He's been pissing in the fridge again. Yeah, that's good.
So you, instead of like this whole narrative, you're really getting to the gist of it. So,
all right, I get half a point. I got a little laugh.
I think that I'll give you half a point on that one. That one's good.
All right.
No, well, what's the point is if I laugh, you get a point, right?
Yeah, but that was kind of a fake laugh. Give me a fake laugh.
It was a chuckle.
It's half a point.
All right, half a point.
All right, so you're up next week.
All right.
Are you gonna make one up, or are you gonna find one?
I heard a joke.
Oh, yeah?
Your joke just reminded me of this joke. And then we'll. So I think it's pretty good.
Okay, let's hear it.
You want to hear it now?
Oh wait, no. Save it for next week.
I was like, man, dude, was this like stand up? I'm on. All right, so that was the opening joke.
We'll call it Larry and the refrigerator. No, give it away. I think I want to work on that one, kind of build up, because the whole week I was trying to think of, I wanted to make up my own, but I had nowhere to start. I just, when the pressure was on, I don't know, I think I needed more time, and so I found this one. I felt like it was a good sort of base. Like you could change up the elements, I could change the elements and maybe come up with my own.
Yeah.
Using the same sort of beats.
Yeah, I've never tried to make up a joke like that. Like I've made up jokes where a funny line, but I've never made up a joke like you would tell, like like a story kind of joke.
Yeah, I don't think I have either. That's why when it came down to doing it, I was like, this is tougher than I thought it would be.
Before we started, I had a thought that kind of crossed my mind, and I was curious to what what you thought is, what if you wanted to laugh,
Mm-hmm.
what could you watch or what would you think of that would always bring a laugh? It could be a movie, it could be a memory, it could be a general thing. I mean, last week we talked about you falling, tripping, like that slapstick stuff.
Yeah.
So a type of humor, or
so what always gets me? What did you think of something for you while I'm thinking?
well, I always like hearing a baby laugh, like I watch on YouTube, and I don't know why that. Well, maybe I kind of do. And then anything with like kind of pets will make me laugh too.
Like animals?
Yeah, animals. If they do something, because I think because they don't know that they're doing something that makes you laugh. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's almost like pure laughter, like pure humor, because it's not a setup. And even if like a baby or a puppy knows that it's doing it and knows that it's trying to set it up, it's kind of like it's not like a real setup. Like an adult will sometimes try to set up a funny line, like try to steer the topic in a way like, oh, it reminds me of the story. What a coincidence! Reminds me of the same story I wanted to tell just 5 minutes ago. So to me, it's like it's maybe pure is not the right word for it,
but it's not contrived at
contrived
all.
Yeah, it's not contrived, it's innocent.
Well, the thing that always gets me to laugh is the Just for Laughs skits on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is, somebody being. So it's kind of the opposite. It's like a very contrived situation, usually like a prank situation, where, and what's funny is like, I think I laugh more when they tell the person that they're on TV, and it's like that, you see them like relieved, like, you son of a gun. Like that always makes me laugh.
Yeah, that does make you laugh. Yeah.
I think it's because, and in both cases, and maybe this has something to do with what makes humans laugh. I think a laugh is, we talked about how laughing is, we talked about how it's not something that is forced. It's something that is naturally triggered. And I wonder if it's this, like, maybe that's what makes people laugh, is when you see something, like you're saying, that's not contrived, but it's just a natural reaction, a triggered reaction that we identify with.
Yeah.
So when somebody is relieved and like has that quintessential feeling of there's just something funny and relieving and identifiable in that, in the same way with animals and babies, but like in a purer way, and it's funnier because it's a little bit more caricaturized, like in the sense that a baby and an animal, they're just, I don't know, like you said,
it's all instinct.
Yeah, it's pure.
Yeah. Well, some of it I think also is the fact that the level of threat is extremely low to non-existent when you reveal, because then they, regardless of whether a police came by and thought they're the one who stole the tire, or or the little kid went missing, or the puppy was eaten by like a wolf, or I don't know, how like they went, and the person's like, oh, what am I gonna do? Right? But then, and so that builds up the tension, the anxiety. But when someone realizes that there is no tension, there really wasn't tension, they just perceived the tension, then it's humorous, because the anxiety, and we can relieve it as humor because the threat is very, very low. So like someone slipping on the ice is funny. Someone slipping and falling out of a 5-story window is not funny.
Right.
But if it's in a movie you know, and the person's like, you know, it's not real, so you can laugh, right?
That's true.
So it's like the level of threat has to be low enough to where you don't perceive it as a significant threat to where the anxiety stays. You know, so somebody could tell like a joke and someone takes offense to it. So they feel like threatened, like an aspect of them is attacked, or a concept they have of themselves or who they identify with, like a group or whatever. And, you know, like everyone's heard Polish jokes or whatever. And so someone who's Polish might be offended, right? My dad used to hear West Virginia jokes he's from West Virginia. He would laugh.
Yeah.
Because he would like, you know, it's West Virginia's whatever. So he felt the level of threat was smaller, you know? So I wonder if sometimes, I guess I'm just rambling on to just say the level of threat, I think might have something to do with humor.
Well, I wonder if, I mean, this might sort of take the magic out of it, but I wonder if there's an aspect to it that it is just a mechanism of relief. It's like a relief valve when our emotions go too quickly, let's say, from one to the other. And so it's like a pressure release valve. So it's like it's the same as going, oh, thank God.
It's like a sigh. I wonder if, and that's kind of what we were going to last week, where I thought that humor probably came from anxiety. And so, you know, before societies and cities were built, people were out hunting, and a surprise is death. You know what I mean? The more likely, if you're surprised, that means there's a predator there. So if you think it's a predator and you look and it's just a tree branch that fell, you're like, ah. And I wonder if laughter kind of has really evolved from the sigh of relief to where the realization that the threat is not there.
Well, I mean, you're
safe.
You're still talking about it in terms of evolution, but couldn't you imagine a hunter laughing at that? Like, oh man, you know, like
yeah. I mean, I'm just talking about the origin of it, but I could still see it being humorous as anxiety. But I think humor has evolved broader to include where you were anxious and then you realized what you were anxious about didn't really exist, or the level of threat was low, to just an absurd thing you're watching on TV, you know? So it's gone from just here to something that encompasses more than what originally started.
Well, I think the medium has evolved for sure. Like we didn't used to have TV, but I think people still laugh just as much like 50 years ago, 100 years ago, as they do now. You know, like I don't know why that. Like I think it's a physical thing in us, like we're talking about, as a release valve. That as long as humans have been around, humans have needed it to release that pressure.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think humor has probably been around for a really, really, really long time. But the amount of humor, I think, is definitely way more now than ever was, because, I mean, a lot of us, a majority of people feel safe. Like if you lived 6,000 BC, then and you're building pyramids, you probably have less to laugh about when you're sore all day and you're getting whipped and you feel like you're nothing, as opposed to you're the pharaoh who can sit there and he might see this or see that. You know what I'm saying? I think
maybe, but I don't think that humor is actually I don't think it's a privileged thing. I think it's the opposite. I think we've talked about how humor comes out in the cultures that are persecuted more than it does in those that are privileged. You know, like it tends to be something that is well developed in cultures that are stressful, high stress, high pain, rather than the more easygoing, comfortable.
I mean, I agree that stress, people can use humor to get through stress. But I think I think in hindsight, they'd probably be able to use more humor looking back at the situation than in the middle of the situation. You know, like I remember watching some YouTube thing about comedians, and they're talking about what's funny, not funny, things are edgy, not edgy. And this girl was saying that she was raped, and she'll sometimes make jokes about it in her stand-up. And I doubt she was making jokes at the moment, but you know, but now she can look back when she has some sense of, I think, safety, to where she can process it and laugh it, and laughing at it can kind of help through it. But I do agree that it's stressful. I'm sure, like being in the military, people out on the battlefield, I'm sure, you know, they probably make jokes before things go down, and then right after things go down, you know, just to kind of relieve some of that emotion.
Yeah. Well, that sort of brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, and that is, you've already touched on it, is how different comedy is in our day and age, in the sense that, this is what made me think about it. Somebody said that people today watch horror movies because, like, horror movies are such a big deal now, sort of to your point, where they weren't, you know, even the outset of it, actually comedy was more important for black and white and that sort of thing. But the reason horror movies are becoming more and more of a thing are because of the lack of thrill in people's lives. So if you look at it evolutionary, or if you just look at it from a time sense, like as you were saying before, people had to deal with stress and thrill, even though it was a dangerous thrill.
Yeah.
And it was they dealt with it on a regular basis, whereas now fat Americans are sitting home like me and not experiencing the same kind of thrill. And so that's why this article mentioned roller coasters, and the same sort of thing, roller coasters and horror movies, and I would add comedy. I feel like comedy's harder today than it was, because I think it goes to what we're talking about as far as not needing to relieve a lot of that pressure. Now there is more boredom, and more anxiety in terms of, like, am I fitting in? Facebook has brought in a lot of, is my life as good as it should be? That's existential angst and pain in general. What do you think?
I think, say, like, what if roller coasters existed, in the Roman era? I mean, would people think this is stupid? You know what I mean? Like, why the safety it's too safe? Because back then, I mean, they were watching gladiators kill each other.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So for them, they're like, this isn't any fun.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I wonder if some of it, like I said, is that we have a sense of safety in our society where, and I think of a jester in a court. They're making all these jokes and stuff to relieve the tension, but most people are serious because it's life or death, like every day. You trip and you break your leg and your bone comes out of your leg, you're likely to get an infection and die.
Yeah.
Whereas us, we're like, hey, look, I can park in handicap now. You know what I mean? We make jokes about it where that would be something somebody died for.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I mean, even philosophical ideas where, I think of like Protestant or Catholic, where they would kill each other for heretical ideas, where now we can make jokes about it. So we have a sense of you can say this, and the repercussion of that is very low.
So does that? So in the modern age, is comedy harder or easier? Was a jester's job? I love that you brought up the idea of a gesture. I think that's a really important subject to talk about in this podcast. If you think about a gesture, is his job easier than the modern day comedian? One, because there's I don't know if he has much competition.
Yeah, I was about to say he's the only show in town.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But two, the pressures that everybody's feeling is so much higher. It's easier to relieve it, or is it? Or would you say no? It was harder?
I think, well, one, it was probably easier to make people laugh back then because people weren't trying to make people laugh. You know what I mean? Life is just hard. So there's probably very few people who were humorous and made jokes or did humorous things, especially slapstick. There might be some people who had like funny lines they might say, but when it comes to slapstick stuff, you know, people weren't like, I'm gonna not walk around like an imbecile. Yeah. You know, and also I think some of the jester's job, I think it probably was people with mental health issues.
You think so?
That, yeah, like maybe someone who's bipolar or schizophrenia, and they're hearing and saying weird things that's unrelated, and people are like, okay, you know, and that's a place where they had in society, or maybe, you know, the kind of mysticism too, a place where some mental health issues could be, and it was like seen not as someone has a problem, but this is their expertise in this area. But I think now there's so many things out there that's funny that it's harder. You can say something, people are like, yeah, I heard that already from so-and-so. They took this from so-and-so. And, you know, there's what do they call it? Collateral thinking or coincidental thinking, where comedians will have a premise that's kind of the same.
Yeah, it's like you see same movies, the same premises come out in movies like all the time.
Yeah. And so so the ideas are sometimes overlapping. So it's hard to be unique in that way.
Especially since if a gesture was to tell a joke, there wasn't Facebook recording it where somebody in China could see it, you know, millions of people could see it. It was just that one court. Yeah, that's a good point. As I think sort of the goal of the beginning stages here, I would like to start building a criteria, almost a rubric, so later in the next couple episodes, as we pick out like shows and actual comedians that we want to dissect a little bit, I think it's good to have a rubric for it, an idea, maybe some kind of standard as we're talking about, you know, as it is sort of an anatomy of a joke. We want to look at, okay, well, this comedian is funny or not funny based on what we've said before, you know. So thinking of gestures, and not the physical gestures, but jesters, what can we glean from the job of a jester that we can hold up as a standard for today's comedian or comedy show?
Well, I think that the three things I seem to keep coming back to is element of surprise or unexpectedness. The level of threat is very low for the person laughing, you know. And what was the other one that?
Like a sudden shift in tone.
I just had it a second ago, but
well, we need to write these down if we're gonna be.
Yeah, well, let me hear yours, and then see if it'll bring it back. The third one.
Well, so I definitely think the element of surprise, or unexpected, I think those are similar but not the same. I think that's why when somebody falls down, if they're not
Mm-hmm.
hurt, people will laugh because it was unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a clowniness that I think comes from somebody making fun of themselves or hurting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
There is something funny. So in these elements, I think there has to be something about self-deprecation,
Yeah.
being able to make a fool. When you hear the term making a fool out of himself or herself, there is self-deprecation that is funny, and maybe we could talk more about that. Okay, so self-deprecation, and then and relief. I think we talked about relief.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what the sense of allowing. That's what I was going to say is breaking the emotion, the
Yeah.
tense emotion.
Okay.
So surprise, relieving the emotion, and then the level of threat is really low. And I think that's why the self-deprecating humor is funny, is because where everyone has insecurities. They don't want to like stand out. Say like you don't want to stand out in a crowd, and then somebody who's like, that's going to be humorous because they're doing the thing you're afraid of, and they don't feel threatened. Because you're enjoying someone else who's standing up and saying, "Hey, look at me," and doing a ridiculous thing, which you would feel completely embarrassed or mortified or scared to do,
Yeah,
So those are
that's
the three
interesting.
things so far. I think maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but
So you had surprise?
surprise, uh, relief of emotions or breaking the tension of emotions, and then sense of low sense of risk for the person laughing.
So safety?
Yeah, safety. You feel safe.
Interesting. Okay.
So somebody who has a lot of confidence, if you make fun of them, they're gonna still laugh because they're like, that doesn't touch me because I know who I am. But someone who's very insecure, they're not gonna laugh, or they might feign laughing, or they might laugh and then later on start like, is he trying to say something? Because there's a threat to who they think they are or they're standing.
Well, if getting to laughing, if we're just talking about laughing, that is a common thing throughout history, is laughing in the face of danger, like a show of security or power has often been someone laughing in the face of danger. Safety and laughter do go hand in hand in that sense.
Well, it reminds me of the scene in The Dark Knight where Batman is beating up Joker, Heath Ledger in the interrogation room, and he's still laughing because in his mind, he might be in pain, but he's not going to die. He doesn't think that Batman's going to kill him. He doesn't think that ultimately, the bottom line, he's not going to be hurt. So he might be in some temporary pain, but the real pain is what Batman's going to go through because he has to choose.
Yeah.
So the Joker is safe, so you can beat me up, but the real pain for him is that you're going to have to make this really painful choice, and I'm safe from that dilemma.
Well, I think that that reminds me of one that I think a word that needs to be included in our list here, in a rubric, and that is irony. There's something about irony that is extremely funny to intelligent human beings. And I think that's what you're talking about when the Joker's laughing. He's laughing at the irony. He's laughing at the fact that he shouldn't. He's laughing at the fact that he's laughing and he shouldn't be. And the irony of him is very the meta of his laughter in that scene, I think, is really important to look at comedy, because he's laughing at himself laughing, because he knows that the irony is that he's laughing and Batman's trying to hurt him but can't kill him.
Yeah, and he says that you can't hurt me. And he says that line. He says, you can't hurt me. I wonder if, too, listening to what you're saying, if maybe another aspect is the cultural environment that the person is in.
Okay, what do you mean?
So like what we were talking about in medieval times, making religious jokes probably would not go down very well. Where today we can make those kind of things. So your context of where the person is
well,
it has something to do. Like today, the internet, the context broadens out, you know. But I think if before the internet, if someone were to tell it, what I remember is this Billy Crystal HBO special where he went to Russia before the wall fell to do a stand-up, and he said it was really tough because to make them laugh, because what he made people laugh here, and then some stuff overlapped. So some stuff he'd make Americans laugh, they would laugh, but some stuff it wouldn't. And because the way they perceive themselves is different than how we perceive them. So like I said, if you feel threatened, an aspect that you value about yourself is threatened, you're less likely to laugh, right? And if they perceive Americans as always attacking them, and then this comedian is making fun of them, and they see it as another attack, they might not think it's funny.
Well, so maybe what you're talking about there is connection with your audience, or connection. So the person who's telling the joke and the person who's laughing, there needs to be a certain amount, and I think it goes to what you're saying about safety. There needs to be a certain connection for certain jokes. One,
commonality.
Of
understanding. Yeah. So
a common a language, culture, I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, so like last time I talked about like Pinocchio, boop, right? Yeah. But if someone never heard of Pinocchio, then they'd be like, what the hell is that all about?
You're right. You have to have a common pool of information to draw from with a lot of good comedy.
Yeah, and so I think that's why commonality with other people, but that's why I'm saying culture, you know? So there's like a common theme within American culture that certain things translate, whether someone's gay or straight or older or younger, and then certain jokes are just gonna like, instead of have everyone, it's gonna like narrow in on this group, that group, and maybe broaden out to a little bit more, you know, where the group culture is more widely accepted or less widely accepted. You know what I'm saying?
Like the things that are talked about in the joke.
Yeah, things that are talked about in the joke, where some people might not get it. You know, I mean, there's many times somebody tell a joke and I'm like, I'm not sure what that means, because I'm not a part, especially like if I watch Twitch. Yeah. And sometimes you know, they got all these memes and stuff, and I'm like, what does that mean? You know, so for me, I'm not laughing because I don't know what that means. Yeah, well, that goes to the idea of inside jokes.
Well, first of all, the thing I thought about is if you're telling a joke in Chinese and everybody only knows English, it's not necessarily going to go over very well. Now you can that's why physical comedy is so important. How you tell the joke is very important. You could tell a joke and still get a laugh. Yeah. But obviously it's not going to be as good if they can't understand your language. Yeah. I think actually that would be an interesting skit. The comedian who doesn't speak their language but has to make them laugh. You know, it's kind of Impractical Jokers type thing where you get put in front of like all these people that don't speak a word of English, and you have to tell jokes to make them laugh.
That reminds me of a funny story, which I'll tell at the end.
You got all kinds of funny stories.
What?
Right. You got a lot of funny stories today.
What was the other funny story?
You told me to remind you, like, that my joke reminded you of a funny story.
What was the punchline of your joke? Oh, I knew that is another funny story. Yeah, I guess I got two. So
all right, okay.
One I got two.
Okay, I don't have one. So
one of my funny stories about a friend, it was always having me carry him.
All I heard was, "I was fine, just me carry him." There, see, like it was still funny, but I had no idea what you were saying.
I have one of my funny stories is a friend I have who I always have to carry. Good old backpack Judah.
Oh, well.
Yeah, so I think we've come up with at least 4, and I think anything more, it really kind of comes to like that quadrilateral I was thinking of in John Wesley's thought, where it's
the Wesleyan
about
quadrilateral, yeah.
Yeah, so it's about knowledge, emotion, or knowledge, experience, history, and scripture for him.
So what would our quadrilateral be?
Would be culture, the commonality of the people you're speaking with. The level of threat is low. Breaking the emotional tension, and then surprise. So surprise, emotion, low threat, and then common culture.
So I think, to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but you could use that formula to create a joke to where you begin, and maybe this is how these different parts come in temporarily.
Yeah.
Where they come in sequence. But you have to build commonality. So you build a rapport. You do something to say for them to pay attention, like, oh, okay, I know where he's coming from, or something. Okay, I can kind of see. So you something you like. You ever wonder why? So that's what that's a quick way of creating rapport. Then safety, but see, like, safety can go either way. It's a double-edged sword. Like you could spend the rest of the time building a false sense of a false lack of safety. So like, oh, this doesn't seem good. And that's when you bring in the sudden shift in tone or sudden shift in emotions.
Yeah, it's sort of like the Andy Kaufman. He would always keep that tension there where people were not sure, wait a minute, is this real? Are they really wrestling and hurting people?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And then he had that persona where he was an insult comic where he'd go out and insult people. And some people were like, wait a minute, is he making jokes? Because he's just saying mean things to everyone around the room.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then when people figured that, oh, this is like a bit that he's doing, he's not really serious, he's just saying things that a normal person couldn't say.
Yeah.
And then so some people would laugh because they didn't feel like he was really threatening them, like who they were. And that's why I think, like, Seinfeld, he's always talking about nothing, but in reality he's talking about something everyone experiences.
Right.
So like, you're in the shower and there's a hair and you're like, or you're on Halloween and you had to pick these Halloween things where it was like really flowy, it wasn't he wanted to be Superman, but the outfit
yeah.
wasn't a super fit. You know what I mean? So,
well, that's a good transition for next week. We got to wrap things up, but I did want to, one of our first shows to tackle be Seinfeld. To me, Seinfeld is the funniest show. Let's say sitcom, and we can discuss. We can get a little deeper on what it means to be a sitcom, but I think that Seinfeld is the funniest sitcom of all time.
okay.
And I wanted to sort of dissect the elements that make it great.
Okay. Maybe pick an episode.
Yeah.
And then we can watch it beforehand, and then we can have some
Okay.
thoughts.
Yeah. I might try to remember what my favorite episode is, or maybe just look up what the funniest episode is. I think that'd be a good place to go next week.
Okay.
But let's leave a little time here because our good friend Joseph Rode has
two stories.
He's got a double-decker today.
What was the second thing you were saying, and it reminded me of the story?
I don't remember now. So the first one was the refrigerator.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Being in the refrigerator.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, where if you were to tell a joke in a different language.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
that one I'm gonna tell first because I might forget it.
Okay.
So when I was in seminary, one of my professors, he would do mission trip down to South America, and he speaks fluent Spanish.
Okay.
Or no, he doesn't speak any Spanish at all. So he had to have an interpreter the whole time.
Oh, okay.
And no, I'm sorry. He did speak Spanish. He wasn't like really fluent, but he spoke enough to where he can translate. So he was the translator from the Spanish-speaking pastor down there to his American friends who went with him down to missions trip.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So one Sunday, he is up on the podium translating for the Spanish-speaking pastor. So on one side of the church is all Spanish-speaking, and the other side is all American or English-speaking.
Okay.
And so he's telling me that he's down there, and the guy starts saying, and he would pause and give him time to translate.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And then, he started preaching. He started getting into it. He giving them less time to translate.
Okay.
So he's like trying to hurry up and translate and stuff. And then he starts missing things. Like he doesn't know what the guy's saying.
Oh,
and
no.
then he says, all of a sudden he would say something, and then everyone would clap on this side. And he says, and he would say to the people speaking English, I'm not sure what he says is going too fast, but if you don't clap, he's going to realize that I'm not translating it. And everybody would clap. And then the guy would say something in Spanish, everybody would laugh. And he says, I'm not sure what he's saying, but if by the time I'm done pointing, I need everyone here to laugh. And everyone's like,
The control that you have when you're an interpreter.
Yeah.
That's good one. Do you remember the lady that was the sign language interpreter that she barely knew any sign language?
Are you talking about for Obama?
Yeah, maybe it was for Obama, but
I thought it was for Obama. Well, there's been a few that came up in the news a couple times, but one was for Obama during Mandela's funeral.
Now Mandela. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
And he went, and the lady was doing sign language, but in reality, she wasn't doing anything.
Well, yeah.
And one thing I know about sign language is each country has their own sign language. So what would be a sign in the United States would not be a sign in Russia.
Well, that's what I actually read some comments about that lady because I thought it was hilarious. I thought she was just making it all up, but apparently she knew something. She was saying words here and there,
yeah.
So she knew it wasn't just completely
gibberish.
Made up.
But yeah, she just knew some signs that she was just throwing it in here and there. Well, I've seen a few times, like on the local news, where like some lady would say that she did sign language, which I'm actually surprised because I thought out of all the languages, sign language would be the best universal language.
Oh, so you're surprised that it's not
It's
universal?
different with each country. I would imagine that they would just say, you know what, this is what it means for everywhere. So someone who does sign language could go to China and it would still mean. But anyway,
well, we do have universal signs. I mean,
yeah,
you know,
like if you.
yeah. Well, even that's not. You know, they do two fingers.
Yeah.
In
And some do like white.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is interesting. It's fascinating how languages differ. Okay, so your second
one, when you're talking about the guy peeing in the refrigerator. So this is a story my dad told me when I was younger, and for the longest time I didn't believe him. I thought he was just always pulling. I don't know if you remember, my dad had enough interaction with him to know that sometimes he just like tells. Like he's pulling your chain, he's saying something that seems believable, but also kind of far-fetched, and you're like, it's a gray area whether this is true or not true, you know? And so for the longest time as a kid, I just thought he was just saying it just to, you know, like make a joke and tease me a little bit or something. And then when I got older, my mom says, no, that's what happened. So when I was a kid, I used to sleepwalk. And so my dad would say that I would just walk through the living room and sometimes go outside, and he would have to redirect me to go back into the
your bedroom.
And sometimes I would wake up or I would be sleepwalking and I would pee in his shoes in the closet. He said he would get up and his boots for his uniform had pee in him, pee all over him, and he was picking me up. He's like, and he'd have to clean him out because and he said that a couple times he would he'd be sleeping and you hear that pee sound. And he started waking up like immediately because he would know, like he would like sleeping like over to the closet and see me like go over there and be like,
snatch you up.
Or he'll like carry me while I'm pissing to the toilet because I'm pissing all over his shoes in the closet and everything. And for the longest time I was like, no. He's like, I'm telling you, I'm serious. You used to piss all over my shoes. I'd be pissed off in the morning.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Man.
All right.
I recently heard something about that. Maybe
you heard about me peeing in someone's shoes?
I can't remember. Well, all right. Well, that wraps it up. And then one of these days, we're going to tell people why we call the show Chickenfoot. Not today. Well, that'll be the hook for next week.
Yeah.
Hey, and we got to work on an outro. Something funny that we say to say goodbye.
You know, I saw this meme on Facebook, and I thought it was funny. Where somebody took a slogan off a package of like cheese,
Okay.
and he says, now this is what I'm always going to say every time I leave a room. You know what I mean?
Well, that's good. What was it though?
I'm trying to remember.
Stay pasteurized, everybody.
No, like stay cool. Cheese slices or something like that, you know. He's like, stay cool, cheese slices.
All right, I like that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So let's try to, if we see any funny slogans or any slogans off of anything.
Okay.
And because one thing I used to use is Little Caesars. Their slogan on their pizza boxes would be hot and ready. And I would say, hey, ladies, you like your pizza like you like your men hot and ready? So if we can find a funny slogan but used in a different context.
Okay,
that
well,
would be funny.
I've got a slogan to close us out.
All right.
This note is legal tender for all debts and public and private.
That's a good one. Yeah, let's keep that one.